Welcome back, guys. We're going to keep on studying with PLO Vision, and we're going to study turn plays. Um, so I'm averaging 70%, so my goal would be to arrive at 80%. Um, yeah, I think that more than that is almost impossible to achieve, I would say. So here we have range advantage for sure. So check. I think we wanna check because we are not going to make better hands fold and we have showdown value. Yeah, I mean betting would be as turning our hand into a bluff almost. So also our hand, if we are good on the turn, we are going to be still good on the river probably. So check. Here we are going to check because we do not have showdown value. But the problem is that we are not blocking the 9. I mean, we're blocking a bit the 9 jack, but we do not hold a 9. So, although we do not have showdown value, I think we have to check pretty often. With two clubs, it's more appealing to bet this particular hand. So 3-bet pot. He bets 1/3. I think we have to call. Um, yeah, I mean, this opponent could still have something like 7-8, something like that. And we are we're racing sometimes with clubs, which is a bit surprising, I would say. And I would say that with kings we're also racing. No, we're not racing with kings. Or with a 6, we are racing quite often here, but not always because with 9s, yeah, sometimes. So with kings and 9s, we're mostly calling. With 6, we are sometimes racing. Yeah, with aces, mostly calling. Yeah, why we're racing more often with a 6 than with kings and 9s is because with a 6 our hand is somehow vulnerable. For example, if we have like a6 7-8, for example, or a6 jack queen, our hand is vulnerable to straights and yeah, this kind of stuff. And also we're going to raise with a 6 with a hand like a6 jack queen, because even if our opponent has 9s or kings, we're still going to call the river. So uh, it's not that we're going to lose more by raising on the turn, because we're going to lose our whole stack anyway. So yeah, that's why you want to raise like medium made hands, but which are vulnerable, and call more often with something like kings and 9s. So 4-bet pot, He's betting, yeah, he's betting a small on 8 for 3 deuce. I think, I think I'm going to pot, check. But we are going to pot very often here, with aces, for example. Yeah, with aces we are potting almost every time, even if we do not have a 5, just because there is so much money on the by the turn that, I mean, you're not going to fall to a bet, um, so you better bet it yourself since your hand is still vulnerable. If your opponent has something like 8, 9, 10 jack, something like that. But here apparently ace 6 9 5, ace 6 9 5. It's a check. Um, it's a check, but with clubs, it's a pot, which is a bit surprising. This. Oh, well, maybe you think that he's not going to bet, a flush draw since you have the ace of clubs. But yeah, no, not entirely sure why ace 6 9 5 is a check, but with the ace of clubs, it's a pot. Okay, 4-bet pot. He should most of the time just pot it on the flop, by the way. Here, I think this is a nice check. And it's a pot. It's a pot. Yeah, what I was thinking is that your hand is, you're either ahead or you are not on the turn. Um, and you're not afraid of any card really. I mean, of course, a 3 or a 5 you could lose the whole pot, but it's quite unlikely that your opponent is going to have, threes, fives, or 3 5 since he just 3-bet pre-flop. Mhm. Notice that if you have the ace of hearts, you're going to check it back. Although I'm sure that if you bet this combo, this guy is not going to fold a king, a queen, or a jack high flush. So I guess that you could just check it back as well. So to bet for bet for bet, bets small. And now I think it's time to fold. He flowed one on the flop just because when this guy is for betting, he's going to have a lot of aces. And he has a weak flush draw. Maybe he's trying to take the pot on the turn, something like that. That's why he's floating with kind of weak, I would say. Okay, 4-bet pot, 4-bet pot, he bets 1/3. And now I think it's time to check because we do not have any heart whatsoever. Even if we are holding like hearts, since they are not the nut flush, you're mostly going to check. In fact, even if you have the nut flush, you're going to check here a lot. Um, The reason is that when your opponent call, he's going to have more deuces and more four deuce than you have, and also since he called, he's going to have, yeah, I think he's going to have more full houses than you have, and also notice that he just called uh, the the flop bet, so he's not going to have, yeah, I mean he's going to have a lot of full houses, I would say, or more full houses than you have, and yeah, that's why the out of position player on this situation, he's going to check almost all of his hands. For sure, if he has something like X, he's going to check 100%, right? So 3-bet pot here, he has a range advantage for sure. I think we won bet pot or mm, yeah, it's just a kind of mixed strategy here. But mostly most checking than betting. Um, yeah, I mean it's a mixed strategy between betting 50 and checking. The reason why you're not going to pot, mm, um, yeah, the reason why you're not going to pot if you bet most of the time is because you do not hold on as you do not have queen 10. Uh, well, for starters, you're going to bet in general 50% more often than pot. But on this particular occasion, you do not hold the queen 10, which is an ad. So there's really no point in potting here. In fact, if your opponent has something like Jack 9 or King 9, you really want him to continue. And also, you are blocking a little bit the flash draws, holding the King of Hearts. For example, without the King of Hearts, if you bet, you are most of the time going to pot just because you do not want your opponent to draw to a flash draw. And since you do not have the King of Hearts, your opponent is more likely to have it, or if he has another flash draw, he's more likely to have a flash by the river since you are not blocking hearts. With Queen 10, I think you are mostly going to, well, it's going to be a mixed strategy between betting, checking, but you're going to check not all that often, and you're going to prefer the larger bet instead of the small bet. So you check 26%, you bet 50, 32%, and you bet pot 42%. Uh, let's see what he's going to do. With the ace of hearts, he's going to pot. Which is a bit surprising. I would say that it would make more sense to bet just 50% with this queen 10, um, just because you want your opponent to draw to a bad flush draw. Yeah. Also notice that when you are holding the ace of hearts without a second heart, you are also going to bet most of the time just because it's an absolute disaster if your opponent um, checks back on the turn to a bad flush draw. So when you hold the ace of hearts and you have a straight, you tend to bet very often. That's because of that you do not want your opponent to draw to a bad flush draw. Okay. A9 jack, 3-bet pot. He should have the advantage because he's going to have a lot of aces here. So it goes check raise, A9. And here I think I would just pot just because there is only 100%, $100 to play, so to speak. And this guy is going to have jacks, nines, eights, I don't know, ace king. I don't know, ace king, queen, jack, maybe with backdoors, or ace queen, jack nine, king, queen, jack nine would make sense on his shoes. So yeah, I think it's time to bet. Even if you hold, okay, with the ace of hearts, queen, queen, 10, you actually check most of the time. But if you only hold the ace of hearts and then queen, queen, 10, you are going to prefer to bet because of what I said. You do not want your opponent to draw to a bad flush draw. Yeah, okay. Here, 5, 6. This is a board which is going to favor his range most of the time, or pretty neutral. Here, what it is an easy fold, right? 3, 4, 8. The ace favors his range probably. Here, this is a check back. I think um, you have some showdown value, but also, I mean, even if he check, you're going to check a lot back, of course, if you're playing against GTO opponents, right? And in fact, he's going to bet only 75% of the time. I mean, 15% of the time. Even with something like Queen Jack 10-7 with spades, I think you could bet that some percentage of the time. Queen Jack 10-7. Okay, he's not going to have that. Or 7-10-9 Jack with the spades. Yeah, you're going to bet this. Not like maybe 30% of the time, something like that. A bit more with three spades because you're blocking your opponent's continuation range. And this is not such a disaster if you get check raise here just because there's one less spade on the river, so your draw is not as good as here, right? Yeah, because here you are blocking your own outs. And yeah, but with this particular, with 7, 10, 9 jack, even if you do not have showdown value, you are not blocking the continuation range of your opponent. So I'm just going to check this back. Hmm. Okay, he bets 50%. He calls. Now the ace favors his range for sure. And here they're going to pot just because, well, for obvious reasons. He should pot most of the time. Ah, okay, he donks. On this occasion, he donks 1/3. I think fall. I mean, it's very, very close. This because you need like 25%. In fact, it's just a goal. Like, yeah. Um. Of course, uh, if you have clubs, I would call this 100% of the time. And in fact, the seven it's also an out. So the ten, the jack, the queen, the seven. Yeah, I think I would just call, but I mean it's pretty close. Not a big deal either way. With the club draw, I would recommend calling 100% there. Okay, he bets 1/3. Now he has to check quite a bit because he's not going to have many sevens and threes. Here it's a clear check back, in my opinion, just because you, if you bet, you're going to turn your hand into a bluff, really. I mean, this guy's probably not going to fold a flash by the turn at least. And and yeah, you do not have many outs. So yeah, checking back it seems reasonable. Okay, Jack 9 6, three bet both. He bets half. I think but I mean here your hand is so bad, really, and you're going to have more 7 8s because he just three bet, so he's not going to have. You have more 7 8s than your opponent has probably, and yeah, and you are blocking very. You're severely blocking the 7 8s, and you hold 2 8s, right? Um, Notice here that the correct answer is pot. However, yeah, I mean, if you see at the whole range of Jack 10 8 8 with one spade, it's preferred to bet 50% or to check. So, yeah, in particular, this Jack 10 8 8, I'm not sure why it's preferred to bet pot. This could be because the solution didn't converge, or there is some specific reason why this is the case, which I'm not getting at the moment. But I think it's better just to look at this level and just to check or bet like smaller in general. Also, look that the correct strategy in general is to check very, very often and to bet and to bet on the smaller side of seed of and to bet smaller most often than big. In fact, if you have 7 8, you are most of the time going to check. And when you bet, you tend to prefer the 50% pot. Um, when you're holding the ace of spades, well, yeah, it's kind of similar with the ace of spades than with two spades, but or without any spade at all. But yeah, so you can dunk like 30% of the time or so. Also, when you are holding the ace of spades, ace six of spades, and seven eight, if you bet you're going to prefer a smaller size, just because you want your opponent to draw to a bad flush draw, even though you are going to give a good price to king, queen, ten, or those kind of hands. Okay, for bet pot, he bets 25. Wow, I think this is a check. Your hand has some problems. For starters, you have the ace of hearts, so because you're holding the ace of hearts, it's more likely that your opponent has a 10. And in fact, even if you were holding the ace x of hearts, you're going to check this very often. In fact, they're going to check this very, very often because when he calls, he's going to have more tens than you do. And mm, probably similar number of flashes than you do. So your equity has severely dropped since the imposition player called your bet. Uh, for example, you have the jack, you are going to check this very often, right? Uh, I think you probably want something like ace, king, queen, 10. You're going to bluff this some percentage of the time. In fact, 100% of the time. Ace, king, queen, 10. Ah, okay, but you have hearts as well. Let's say king, 10, 9. No, 10. Exclude card. Yes, you're going to bluff sometimes when you hold a 10 and no hearts or one heart, you know. Um, so the kind of hands that are going to bet. So yeah, you bet mostly flashes. So you bet mostly flashes and you check tens. Well, if you have a 10 and full houses. Yeah, I guess that makes sense. Checking back something like 10 jack and also your tens because mm, 10 9 8 7 you're betting. Yeah, but 10 9 queen king you're checking back. Yeah, I mean you're probably not going to make your opponent fold a flash, so you prefer just to check your 10 and so that he can bluff without a flash and without a 10 on his hand. Okay. 5 5 queen. Um, but if you have okay. So even though a 9 10 jack's a worse hand, that king queen 10 6, king queen 10 6 has better blocking properties than a 9 10 jack, since you could have queens, or yeah, you could have queens holding king queen 10 6. That's why king queen 10 6 becomes a bet. Um, the 9 10 jack, no. If you have something like 6 7, yeah, 6 7 8 9, but 4 6 7, yeah, 4 6 7 8, it's a bet, just because you're blocking your opponent from having a 5, since he's not going to have as many round downs when you're holding a 4 and a 6. If you have something like 6 6 7 8, yeah, 6 6 7 8 is just a check because you have showdown value. Okay, so I think with aces here, you're going to bet quite often as well. Just 35% of the time. So yeah, you're betting queens, and then for ace king queen jack, you're going to check for sure most of the time, just because even though you are blocking your opponent from having queens, um, you have showdown value with your ace king, so there's really no point in betting this hand most of the time. So he bets just 25, which is kind of weird because he should most of the time just be betting. Then he okay. So now we understand why he bet just 25%. The reason is that he's holding kings and he's also blocking the flash draw with the king of hearts. 3-bet pot, and he bet the full pot. He's just calling. And here he bets a small, and here we have an easy fold. So he bet the full pot just because he's holding the ace of hearts. Also, this is queen jack 10. I'm not sure this is 100% 3-bet on the small blind against button. Seems a bit loose. Maybe it's mixed strategy. Ace 5 6. Check check. I think we have to fold here because we do not have. We just have a weak gut shot and no flush draw. With a flush draw, we are going to call most of the time, just because since we check back the flop, our range is a bit capped. Um, of course, if you have aces, you are still going to raise, right? Or if you have jacks and the spades, even even jacks without the spades is most of the time just a pot size bet, just because he didn't three bet pre-flop. So um, he's probably not going to have many aces on his range. Okay, for bet pot, he bets. I think could be a check, could be a pot. Um, yeah, it's just mixed strategy. What is nice about this check is that uh, really your opponent is not going to have many two pairs. Well, he could have something like ace 10, ace 8, but if he had 10 8, he's most of the time going to raise on the flop just because there is a ton of money out there. There's not much to play, so yeah, you're not that afraid of a 10 or an 8 on the river. If you had ace ace king, I think you're going to check very often. Ace ace, let's say ace king 10, ace king or ace king 10 8. Well, they're very, very specific holdings here. Okay, so to bet, three bet, four bet, he's going to have quite a bit of queens, I would say, probably more than his four betting range. But here, well, this is an easy fold here. Um, yeah, since this opponent is going to have a lot of aces. Three bet goes check, check. I think we have to fold here. It's close though. With hearts, you can call, you can raise. Probably it depends. If you have the jack high flush, you're a bit more likely to raise. If you have the 10 high flush, you're a bit more likely just to call. So queen h6, two bet, three bet, four bet. Mhm. This is a very bad card for his range and pretty good for his range. I think I would just spot. I'll check Twitter. I mean, you can bet some percentage of the time. I guess the problem here is that you really want your opponent to have aces, and you're blocking your opponent from having aces since you have one ace. For example, if you had something like king, queen, jack, deuce. Well, yeah, with the king, queen, jack, five, you are blocking your opponent from having a straight with your jack, so you're a bit more likely to bet. So, so yeah, that's the reason why you're a bit more likely to bet king, queen, jack, five than this ace, king, queen, deuce, which is not blocking the 10 jack, and which is blocking your opponent from having aces, which is a hand that would fold. Okay. Check. Well, this has to be a check, right? Yeah, I mean your opponent is going to have more aces here or a jack, so this is 100% check. I guess 50-50. No, apparently they're going to bet this very often, 90% of the time. So yeah, you are more likely to check fours here than you are to check deuces. And yeah, and threes are betting quite a bit. For 7-8, goes check check. Now he bets 50%. I think this is going to be a call because you have a pair of eights, a fold. Yeah, for some very particular reason, this is a fold, but most of the time, this is going to be a call. The reason what I think you can call is because you have a bit of showdown value with your eight, and you have the nine. I mean the 10. The 10 and the 8 are pretty good outs here. And there is some chance that you have the best hand. Since your opponent could have something like ace king queen jack or ace queen jack 10, something like that. Okay, two bet, three bet, four bet. Now he bets a small. Checks because this favors his range. And I think he has to call here since he has the 5, the 7, the 9, and the 10. Yeah, two bet, three bet, four bet. He's going to have aces very often. He donks here, which is weird. And now I would pot here. He's going to check very, very often since he's going to have more aces. He bets. Now he has to check almost 100% of the time, I would say. I think I have to call here. Raise. Yeah. Um. So yeah, he's deciding that. Um. Well, if your opponent has aces, you're going to lose all by the river. However, if your opponent has something like ace, king, queen, jack, something like that, you're going to you're going to put your money in good shape here by the turn. So that's why he's deciding to raise. With kings and hearts, uh, a bit surprisingly, mm, that's funny. With kings and hearts, you're going to fold sometimes. Yeah, but with queens, you're going to fold sometimes as well. Yeah, I mean this particular combo. Yeah, okay, because you have the six, which is a nice blocker to have here, since you're blocking your opponent from having a6. For example, if you had queen queen, I don't know, 7 8, no, queen queen 7 8, you are going to fold, but with queen queen 6 8, now you prefer to raise just because you are blocking your opponent from having a full house. Okay, very quite subtle. Okay, guys, have fun.